So this is figure 15.2. So all of a sudden you end up in A major, right, on that pivot chord. All right, so our next type of modulation is called a chromatic modulation. All right, and chromatic modulation is going to occur at the point of a chromatic progression. So that's going to be a progression that involves the chromatic inflection of one or more tones, whatever they mean by that. You'll see it when you hear it. So the letter name remains the same in a chromatic progression. For example, in the following Bach chorale, at chord 2, the tenor is D, but in chord 3, the D becomes D sharp. So basically what happens is you've got one single change that totally changes the chord and changes the key, and it's always done chromatically, so it's going to be in a half step. And in this, Bach, Du großer Schmerzenmann, I'm just going to identify this one little chord right here. You will see it happen. So in the Bach, I'm going to ignore the pickup and go right to the chord change. So we've got etc., etc. Okay. So you can look at the rest of it. It's on 15.3. So right here, this beat, all of a sudden, actually, let me put in the chord that comes after. Okay, so right here, this is the chromatic modulation. All right, so when you analyze this, you're starting out in G major. All right, and here we've got a typical 5 chord. All right, so for the key of G major, we've got D, F sharp, A, D's down here, D's down here. We call this guy a passing tone. Don't worry about him. He's not in the chord, the C. So we've got D, D, F sharp, A, typical D major chord, very much in the key of D major. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, again, we start seeing accidentals. That's the indication that suddenly we have changed keys without actually changing a key signature. We get this crazy D sharp, and we have to account for it. We have to figure out what it's doing. So we've got an F sharp, a B, so F sharp, D sharp, B, and then on the bottom we have another B. All right, so what key is going to contain this chord that's B, D sharp, F sharp? It's kind of a nutty chord. So suddenly you're going from very easy D major chord, DFA, all right, to a crazy chord, 5 B major chord. All right? B major. So we have to figure out, we go to G and we figure out what its relative key signatures are. All right? So within G major, we can add a sharp, all right? So we can go up to D major. We can subtract a sharp, so we can go to C major. We can also go to its minor keys, right? So the relative minor of G major is E minor, all right? We can go to the key of, we can take the relative minor of D major, right? So we can go up to B minor, which is also related to that, and then we can take one away, we can go to A minor, all right? So within these keys, we've got to figure out what this D sharp is doing, all right? So if you look closely, in the key of E minor, because D sharp won't appear, right? If we think about Father Charles goes down, we're not going to get D sharp into a key naturally until we get to 4 sharps, which is E major. So that's quite a few degrees of separation from G major. So we know it can't be a major key. It's got to be some sort of minor key, all right? Now, if you think about your harmonic and melodic minors, what's a leading tone? Is D sharp some sort of leading tone, right? Well, it is. It's a leading tone to E minor, right? So if we're in E minor harmonic, how does this B function? It's a major 5 chord, right? So that makes a lot more sense. So in this case, we can't account for it in the key of G major. The only way we can account for it is if it's gone to the key of E minor. And then it's a major 5 chord, or more importantly, the key of E harmonic minor. All right? So this is but just the act of going from D to D sharp, that's how it's analyzed. And then if you look and keep analyzing, our next chord should confirm this transition. So we've got an E, a G, and a B. E, G, B. What do you know? That's a 1 chord in E minor. How convenient. So it's a very clear cadence. And we can listen to that just now. All right, did you hear it? Maybe? We played it one more time. You hear that in the tenors? Yeah, that's the modulation right there. All right, and then finally, we have our final modulation, which is a phrase modulation. Phrase modulation just means that a phrase ends in one key with a cadence and then starts up in a new key. So the next section begins in a totally new key. So this is phrase modulation. And you can see this in example 15.4. And it's pretty clear. In fact, I'm not even going to write this one on the board. It's too much work. But you can see at the very end, right here, it goes from 5-1. So you've got a nice cadence right there. Phrase ends, and you'll hear it very clearly. And you're in the key of E minor. And then all of a sudden, bam, starts in C major. All right? So the whole new phrase. And it's a whole new key. You can see he takes out the F sharp, D sharp, makes them natural, and then you're just in that new key. All right? So let's listen to that one. So E minor. Now we're in major, C major. Simple as that. And then we go back to E minor. Okay, so that's what phrase modulation is. Pretty straightforward. Again, there are other types of modulation, but we're not going to worry about them until the next book. I'm more worried about finishing up this book first. Let's see. So finally, a couple of rules for modulation when it comes to construction of periods and phrases. So if you remember from chapter 6, we talked about how melodies are set up within periods, phrases, and there's all these, genres and subgenres. We start with a motive and we work our way all the way up. So either phrase may contain a modulation in two phrase periods. All right, so think about like your typical question and answer phrase. So either of them can contain a modulation. Either phrase may cadence in a key different from the key at the beginning of the period, so they can both totally modulate. And then the basic definition of a period remains. The cadence at the end of the second phrase must be stronger than the cadence at the first phrase. So it's pretty clear. There are no real special rules for dealing with modulations and cadences. I think that's pretty much it for what you need to be able to do for your assignments. We're going to worry about composing with modulations a little bit, for next week. We'll save it, and we'll talk a little bit about binary. But this week, I just want you to worry about figuring out this whole modulation thing. So you're going to do assignment 15.1. You're going to do all of it since you have all week. You are going to do assignment 15.2. All of it. It's not that much. And then finally, you're going to finish it up with assignment 15.4, all right, which is just sort of pure analysis. So to briefly go over these assignments, 15.1, all you have to do is label relative keys, all right? So you get, say, the key of F minor, right? So you're going to just label and all you have to do is list them out. So in F minor, it's relative, if you go up a fifth, right, you get C minor. If you go down a fifth, you get B flat minor, all right? And then the relative major, you go, remember, if you're going from minor to major, you're going to go up a minor third. So it's A flat major. And then the dominant and subdominant of that. So A flat major, E flat major, and D flat major. Okay? So that's all it is. And you're just going to do a bunch of them, get some practice. It'll be good. You guys are probably a little rusty on the circle of fifths. And then in 15.2, all you have to do, I'm not going to make you do all this extra stuff, but I do want you to analyze the chords, and then you're going to indicate which type of modulation it is. So is it a common chord modulation? Is it a chromatic modulation? I don't think you get a phrase modulation because you don't have anything that's that long. And then they want you to circle the pivot chord if it's a common chord. So if it shares the chord, the first one we talked about. And then if it's a chromatic modulation, indicate the new key and continue analyzing the new key. You don't have to worry about labeling all the non-harmonic tones. So number one, let's see. So it could help if you're a pianist to sit down and play some of these modulations.